not simply to support strongmen, but actively, in some cases, to develop military strongmen as an offset to communist development of the labor unions. Such a policy ran counter to America's publicly stated commitment to democracy for all nations, but Eisenhower agreed. At the start of April 1960, Tweedy produced a memorandum for CIA use on American policy in the Belgian Congo. Its particular concern was the handling of Lumumba, who had been working since 14th March as one of the 6 commissioners responsible for the administration of the Belgian colony in the lead up to independence. In quote, "Our feelings," said Tweedy, "is that there is so much at stake in preventing the placing of Lumumba in a prominent role that although we admittedly do not have great resources, we should make every effort possible." A handwritten note by Tweedy at the bottom of the memorandum called for swift action. P.S. Irrespective of any Belgian financial support, it is most important that some CS clandestine services, money and influence get in there quick. But despite his wish to diminish Lumumba's role, Tweedy judged that it would be unwise to alienate him and his supporters. A couple of weeks later, Tweedy wrote to Joseph Satterwhite, the Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, with a careful warning. Although we consider him unscrupulous and willing to accept aid from anyone if it would help him, we suggest the possibility of limited funding to Lumumba, along with other selected leaders. This will provide relatively more help to other leaders, but would also keep the door open for future Lumumba contacts and perhaps avoid alienating him if he learns of our support to other leaders. Tweedy added, "We are opposed to any Stop Lumumba campaign. He is one of the few, if not the only, Congolese leaders with a Congo-wide appeal and standing. We feel it is almost certain that he will play an important political role in the Congo for at least the next 2 years. Thus, an anti-Lumumba campaign could backfire," Tweedy wrote. The cautious approach to Lumumba was by no means shared by senior officials in the Belgian government. On the 1st March 1960, a plan to eliminate him was drawn up by Count Harold Daspremont leading the Assistant Private Secretary to the Prime Minister, and Professor Arthur Dowsey of the Université Libre de Bruxelles. The Count was a nephew of the Grand Marshal of the Royal Court, who was closely associated with the royal family and also had connections with the huge enterprises of Société Générale and Union Minière. The plan he developed with Dowsey included the organization of political forces opposed to Lumumba, political action, man to eliminate is Lumumba, regroup moderate forces by province, Katanga, Kanakat, Kasai, Kalonji. It will be necessary to make available to these parties technicians, propaganda and funds. The total cost is suggested could be a maximum of 50 million Belgian francs. This antagonistic and aggressive attitude to Lumumba was shared by Ambassador Bodin. Lumumba, you remember, he observed some years later, was the communist-inspired leader, which many well-meaning people in the United States thought represented the true spirit of the Congolese, carefully neglecting the fact that he was actually working, if not directly for the Russians, very closely with them. The embodiment expresses hostility to the Congolese leader in even stronger terms. in quotes, Lumumba was such a damn nuisance, he declared. It was perfectly obvious that the way to get rid of him was through political assassination. Political assassination, added Borden, is something which the United States has not been willing to engage in, much to our damage, as we see in the present situation in Vietnam. At the time Borden made this point, the US was embroiled in the Vietnam War. The death of one or two people in North Vietnam, argued Borden, might shorten the war by a year or more, and is certainly thoroughly justified. In my opinion, by history and everything else, political assassination for Borden was nothing less than murder. The Belgians remembered Borden, were sort of toying with the idea of seeing to it that Lumumba was assassinated. This was a view, he said, which he told them he shared. I went beyond my instructions, he stated frankly, and said, well, I don't think it would be a bad idea either, but I naturally never reported this to Washington. Ambassador Borden hosted his first formal dinner in the American Embassy in Brussels in October 1959. The guest of honor was John McCone, chairman of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. McCone, a multimillionaire industrialist from California, had been undersecretary of the Air Force in 1950. He had returned to the private industry before moving to the top role at the Atomic Energy Commission in 1958. Strong-willed and stern, McCone had aroused considerable hostility in his rise to the top. He had outraged scientists at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, in 1956, when he accused them of attempting to create fear in the minds of the uninformed that radioactive fallout from H-bomb tests endangers life. Like Borden, he energetically reported the testing of the hydrogen bomb. In The Invisible Government, David Weiss and Thomas B. Ross report that during his government service, McCone gained a reputation as an uncompromising supporter of John Foster Dulles's doctrine of massive retaliation, the Air Force's atomic warfare theories, and the outlined strategy against the Soviet Union. McCone's reason for going to Brussels in October 1959 was to meet with the president of the European Atomic Energy Commission, known as Euratom. He was on the way back to the US following a 10-day visit to the Soviet Union for discussions with his Russian counterpart and for an inspection of Soviet atomic facilities. An important motive for the trip, he said before leaving the US, was to obtain information, but he didn't know just how much, with respect to data on Soviet uranium ore reserves, a matter that has been carefully guided in the past. Zors A. Medved, a dissident scientist in Moscow, who defected to the West in 1973, stated in 2000 that from 1950, uranium mining had been one of the most closely guided state secrets of the Soviet Union. The year prior to McCone's visit, the CIA and the intelligence organization of the Department of State, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Joint Staff, and the Atomic Energy Commission produced a top secret report titled The Soviet Atomic Energy Program. The report set out estimates both of uranium ore production by the Soviet bloc up to 1957 and of projected production. The estimated future production of recoverable uranium ore in the USSR, as illustrated by a table in the report, would be 4,500 metric tons in 1958, 4,900 metric tons in 1959, 5,500 metric tons in 1960, and 6,000 in 1961. Considering the Soviet bloc inclusively, the table set out an estimated production of 12,000 metric tons in 1958, 13,400 metric tons in 1959, 14,400 metric tons in 1960, and 15,300 metric tons in 1961 rather. The report stressed that these figures were necessarily estimates, but its authors had used all the sources that were available. Macron's visit to Brussels took place against a backdrop of intense negotiation over Congolese uranium. These were triggered by effort by Edgar Senghia, the managing director of Union Miniere, to market to the US the uranium stocks that the company would have above ground at the Shinkolobwe mine when the existing contract expired. In April 1959, Senghia offered to sell 1,000 tons at the very low price of $7 per pound. In October 1959, after a series of meetings in Brussels and dinner with Senghia, Ambassador Borden strongly recommended the purchase of 1,500 tons of uranium ore from Union Miniere for $26 million over a period of years. This was a substantial amount, almost half the amount of approximately 3,310 tons that had been delivered from the Congo to the US in the course of World War II for the Manhattan Project. As a vigorous advocate of all weapons necessary to secure national defense, Baldwin was conscious of the key role he had played in the decision of the American government to proceed with development of the hydrogen bomb. He was not prepared to risk allowing the Soviet Union to obtain the Congo's uniquely rich uranium. Eisenhower was also in favor of purchasing the ore. For him, too, it was a critical military and strategic decision. Secretary of State Christian Hatta, however, advised caution. He warned that such a move would trigger problems with Canada. This was because the US had signed extensive options to purchase Canadian uranium, but had failed thus far to exercise them. Were the US to purchase more uranium from Belgium, Hatta pointed out Canada might insist on revision of the options. When Baldwin met Macron in Brussels, he pushed the case for the purchase of the Congolese uranium. No doubt he was aware through his Union Miniere contact that Shinkolobwe mine in Katanga was still in 1959 producing valuable ore. By 1959, new technologies had enabled lower quality uranium to be enriched to a fashionable quality, thus diminishing the dependence on the Shinkolobwe material. But there was always the risk that the rich Congolese ore would be of value to the Soviet Union. By the time Macron left Belgium for the US, Ambassador Borden thought he had convinced him that the US should buy 1,500 tons of uranium from Senghia. Macron was keen for Americans to purchase the ore, but he shared Hatta's concern about the potential risk of alienating Canada. He could not devise a way of buying ore from Belgians while at the same time making a public announcement that the Atomic Energy Commission would not be purchasing any more Canadian ore. Shortly after Macron's meeting with Borden in Brussels, it was announced that uranium procurement from Canada would not be increased and that the US Atomic Energy Commission already is buying more uranium oxide, U3O8, than it really needs. It was also decided in late 1959 not to buy the ore, offer to the US by Union Miniere, but leaving the rich uranium in Katanga vulnerable to purchase or seizure by the Soviet Union remained a source of huge concern to some very powerful figures in America. So that is the end of chapter 11. So do you think we should read on to chapter 12, or just kind of take us and have a gist around there what we have said so far. What do you think? I'm taking a break, and I will come back here to see what you think. Take us, or just go ahead and read the chapter 2. I'm sorry, chapter 12. So we've had 90 minutes of like onward gist, including reading part of our book. Okay, so I was thinking of opening the line, but I was also thinking of continuing to read. So somebody said we should just take calls, which means you would want to react rather. So I will keep the line open and see if we can have one or two calls before we call it the afternoon or noon. Or better still, since this is my day one back, maybe we should just take it slow too. That's another thing I was thinking, right? So I'm thinking that, let's stop the reading and let everybody digest what we have shared here so far. Go get ready for the evening, sort of, right? And then, until we fully kick back in, and then, that too. And I'm thinking that I should go for the latter, the last one. So what we're going to do now is that I'm going to say thank you for joining me. I'm sorry for leading you on, okay? I could read on, I could take calls, and I could also call it a day this afternoon, so we can go get ready for later in the evening. So I choose that so that we can have more package, more detailed evening. But listen, you can watch the replay of last night next after this, okay? And then you can get set and get ready for the night when I will be back. Good afternoon.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Mayegun ti dé o, ọ̀rẹ́ ará ìlú.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Lórí Facebook, lórí YouTube.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Gbogbo bó ṣe ń lọ ni Mayegun já wa sí.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Bó bá ṣe eré, àní Mayegun máa wí.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Ó sì tún ṣe eré, wàá gbọ́ níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Mayegun Diary politico.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Godfatherism kò sí lọ́rọ̀ Mayegun.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹgbọ́rọ̀ lẹ́nu o.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Àní Mayegun làwa mọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Nayibi #1.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ra kì í.
Mayegun ti dé.
Máyégún ti dé. Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Lórí Facebook.
Máyégún ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Lórí YouTube.
Máyégún ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Ijó ìgbádìyẹ.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Presido bá rúfin o.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Gómìnà kówó jẹ.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Ọlọ́pàá tí ń darí bá.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Òpùrọ́ olóṣèlú.
Máyégún máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀súnràkì.
Máyégún ti dé.
Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o.
Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o, Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò bẹ́ẹ̀. Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀, Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò bẹ́ẹ̀. Oníkan ṣáàtì ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, fáwọn ará ìlú tó gbé wọn débẹ̀ o. Àyè.
Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Ha! Kì máa yí ṣeré, ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣẹ̀fẹ̀. Kì máa yí ṣeré, ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣẹ̀fẹ̀. Ẹni bá ti lè lẹ́bọ̀ lẹ́rù o, ọmọ bá dèrò kàṣà ìtú wọn síta.
Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀súnràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Tẹnitẹni ọmọ Máyégún ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni mo fọlọ́hún ṣọ́ ẹ̀ bá kìlẹ́bù. Lóòótọ́ olódodo ìlú ọ̀tá ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni ìwọ ṣá máa ń ṣọ́ra kò sì mọ́ bẹ̀rù. Bọ́tà ń lè rí bóníṣègùn lé káwọn mọ̀mọ́ fi ṣera wọn ni ó ti dẹrùn tí wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ sì mọ́ bẹ̀. Èèpo ọ̀bọ lọmọ bá dérò tàjẹ́ ò gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́, ó ti dọba lórí àbínú ẹni kò sì mọ́ bùyà. Àìsíwọ̀lú ní ẹnìkẹ́ ìgbódì ẹyin lábàrá ó kó ẹni tó bá dán wò á kàmù. Máyégún ti